This video is sponsored by DistroKid. Yo, what's up everybody? As usual, it's your boy Lahima here. Today what we're going to be talking about is melodic rhythm, essentially how to make your melodies more melodically pleasing. And this was highly requested for my last video, which I'll leave in the description card either here or whatever it ends up at. And that video just goes over how to make just harmonically good sounding melodies. So today we'll be completing the package. But before we get into today's video, let's talk about today's sponsor, DistroKid. So personally, I don't like recommending things on this channel that I don't use myself or don't personally find value in, but I can say this for the fact that I personally recommend DistroKid as a platform to help you with streaming your music. If you're like me and you're an independent artist, one of the most frustrating experiences can be trying to get your music on all platforms very easily and efficiently. DistroKid makes this very easy. With a touch of a few buttons, you can easily have your music on services such as Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, and even more importantly, and my personal favorite, TikTok, which if you haven't already, follow me on TikTok. Personally, I think what separates DistroKid from its contemporaries such as TuneCore or CD Baby is that one, you keep the copyrights to the actual music they release on their platform, which is exceptional. This is an issue I'll always have when it comes to different platforms, especially with TuneCore. Two, and one of my personal favorites, is that unlike TuneCore and CD Baby, which you have to pay a $10 fee, I believe, per release on their platform for singles, and I think it's $40 for actual albums, you pay a one-time fee of at minimum of $20 for DistroKid, and voila, you get unlimited releases for all your music, which is amazing. And lastly, my personal favorite is that the music that you release on DistroKid goes up within 24 hours upon your upload, which is amazing. For other services, even including labels, the process is always 4 to 6 weeks, and for labels it's even worse because they usually send you back edits that they want to make for the song to release on their platform. So I cannot highly recommend DistroKid enough, and if you use my link, which will also be in the description below, you get 7% off your first year of membership with DistroKid, and you'll also be greatly helping out the channel and helping this channel grow. And once again guys, I cannot recommend DistroKid enough. It's an amazing service and I highly recommend it. But anyways, with that being said guys, let's hop into today's video. So as I mentioned last time, one of the major elements that makes a good melody, besides its melodic content, which I can't understate enough is very important, is the rhythm that it actually plays. This is what gives the melody a sense of rhythm. It makes it feel in a particular genre versus another genre. It makes it feel fast or slow. It gives a lot of a sense of emotion in a melody as what rhythm it's actually playing. And a major component of rhythm is something called backbeat and groove. And you'll see this predominantly in Western music. Backbeat is essentially instruments or drums or anything in the song that essentially keeps meter. It essentially indicates to the listener what is the downbeats of the rhythm that you're playing. While groove is the main thing in the song that we usually hear as the interesting element of the song. It is the component or components that is playing interesting rhythms that aren't really particularly in any sort of meter. They essentially give the rhythm interest. So I think the first thing we should do when starting to talk about what makes a good melody is to look at actually just kind of a normal drum pattern and indicate to ourselves what are the meter elements or the backbeat elements or what are the groove elements. So let's hop into Ableton and do just that. And one last thing before I forget, everything in today's video is going to be at 150 BPM. So that means if you program at a lower BPM like 100 or something, everything I'm going to do today is going to be half time of what you originally are used to programming in. So just keep that in mind. So what I made is just a very traditional trap pattern with just a kick, snare, and hi-hat. And each one of these instruments is serving a purpose to the rhythm, and that's what we're here to know. We're here to know which instrument is serving which purpose. So let's go ahead and give it a listen to find out. So if you look at the drums, you can clearly see that two of them are playing a pretty consistent rhythm, and that's the hi-hat and snare. The snare is always playing on the 3, while the hi-hat is playing generally eighth notes. And this is what I mean by something we would call backbeat. The snare and the hi-hat are playing a backbeat role primarily. And why am I saying primarily? Because if you look at the hi-hat, we can clearly see that it's not always playing strictly eighths. Sometimes it defers, sometimes it mutes one or whatever. And this is something you'll commonly see in any sort of rhythm across any sort of instrument or instruments, is that they won't always strictly play one role. Sometimes they'll kind of be in between. But in this case, I would say that the hi-hat is primarily playing a backbeat role. Now, if you look at the kick, for example, this is where it gets interesting because the kick is playing a rhythm that is not in any way, shape, or form consistent. It's consistent, obviously, within the genre, but in terms of the actual rhythm it's playing, its rhythm is pretty kind of all over the place. And this is what I would say is an example of groove. The kick is playing a groove role. Its role is meant to add interest to the beat. It's very important to understand backbeat and groove, because when we start talking about things like chord progressions and melody and top lines, all that sort of stuff, you're going to see that certain elements tend to play a certain role. So now let's start looking at a couple melodies and a couple chord progressions to kind of actually visualize some good examples. So as you guys can see, I have a couple different chord progressions and melodies in front of us, and we're just going to take a look at all of them and just kind of see some good examples of good melody and chord progression composition. So first, let's start off with the blue one. So when you hear this chord progression, the first thing you think of is, okay, all I'm going to do is hear every chord held out for a bar. But on bar 2, I break that expectation by playing something on the 1. So that's the first general rule of advice I would give, is break the listener's expectation of the rhythm that you're establishing. Establish a rhythm, then break it. Obviously not for the whole thing, just very momentarily, but you always want to break the listener's expectation of what rhythm they expect to hear. And you'll see this a lot, particularly in trap music, is that what they'll do is they'll essentially hold out the 1 until the 2 and then play something on the 2. You even see that in the kick pattern I played earlier. It was 1-4, and usually what they do is they would play 1-4-2. But let's listen to this and just kind of see how it sounds. So it sounds really rhythmically good, just doing that simple change. Had I played it just normally, where I just held out everything for a bar, that sounds fine. It doesn't sound bad or anything, but just adding that extra little interest really spices up the chord progression. So let's look at the pad underneath. So the pad solo sounds like this. And with the chords, it sounds like this. So the pad, just like the chords, is acting as backbeat. All it's doing is just keeping a decent sense of time for the listener as they're listening to it. So what is the groove element of this particular melody? I would say it's the top line on top of everything else. So let's listen to that. So the first thing that's distinct about the top line versus the chord and pad that's underneath it is the rhythm that it's playing is not primarily on the 1 anymore. It's playing rhythms that are on the 2 and the ands. And that is what really gives something a sense of groove, is by playing it on the and of rhythms or any sub-rhythm. So for example, the first thing we do is that we establish some sort of musical motif. So if you look at the first measure, you'll see that I'm playing 1, then the and of 1, and then the 4. Which the chords and pad are not doing at all. They're not playing those little sub-rhythms. But then if you look at bar 3, I'm playing a very similar musical motif, and I'm playing in the same direction. You know, the melody goes up and goes back down. In bar 3, the melody goes up and then goes back down. That's how you establish a musical motif, is by using the same, what we call contour, which means the melodic motion, which direction the notes are moving, in this case up and down, and then also using, similar notes. That helps the listener understand that, oh, this is the same idea, just expressed a little bit differently. And that's exactly what we did. If you look at bar 1, there's only 3 notes. Look at bar 3, it's 4 notes. So it's just 1 extra note, but it makes the melody seem a little bit different, which is all we need. Then if you look at bar 2, it's playing a whole different musical idea. It's playing on the and of 2, and it's using the same down contour that we're already used to. And then on bar 4, it's kind of just playing a held out note. So it's very distinct from bar 2. That's another thing. Keep your bar 1 and 3 similar, and your bar 2 and 4 very distinct. That gives your melodies a sense of motion, like they're going somewhere, but also makes them seem similar enough, because the user is always going to be grounded by 1 and 3. So in this case, I would say that the melody is playing both roles. It's playing as a groove and also as a meter. It's playing as a meter because on bar 1 and 3, the melodies are somewhat always similar. They play the similar elements and similar contours, so it grounds the listener, while bar 2 and 4 act as distinct grooves. They're not playing anything similar to anything else, this whole melody. So that's what makes them distinct. So now let's take a look at the next chord progression. So the first thing to note about the chord progression in the green is that we can see that there's actually basically 3 different melodies in one chord progression all playing at the same time. So one of the big things is going to be to make sure all these melodies don't step on each other's toes. So take a quick listen and see how I achieve that. first thing we're going to do is just look at the chords. So when we look at the chords here, we can clearly see that all they're really doing is just playing a whole bar. Every chord is basically playing a whole bar. But in certain areas, all we do is we just mess with the timing a little bit by doing the same thing we did before, which is messing with this idea of the 4. And you see this like it's a super common technique. Instead of playing out the whole bar, we just either extend the 4 to the 2 or just play the 4 onto the end of the next bar. So that's what we did here. So we play the bar, we play 3 quarter notes. Then when the 4th quarter note came in, we took that and we just played that for the rest of the bar. This is the kind of the same musical idea as if we had done last time, which is where we take the 4 and we extend it to the 2 and then play from the 2 into the end of the bar. They both work pretty similar, but they obviously sound and feel a little bit different. But this is what I was saying about, once again, breaking the musical contour. And the next thing we did was just add an extra note on the 3 because we know the listener has not heard that yet. They're waiting for something different in their ear. So adding a little extra note, which we call grace notes, really helps out flesh out a chord progression. And then once again, the next 4 bars, we rinse and repeat basically the same idea, but with some small changes. And then what we do next is take the same idea we expressed in the first 4 bars and just repeat it, but we just do some small changes. So the first small change you can see here is that on bar 1, is that instead of playing it out for the whole bar, we once again stopped on the 4 and played the second chord out for the whole bar. Once again, breaking the expectation that we're going to play that chord out for the whole bar. And then on bar 3, what we do is the same exact idea, but what we do is we add this extra note, this extra G on the downbeat. And that way, we're breaking the listener's expectation of hearing just the same thing they heard the last time. And as you can see, this is a very powerful idea, making small changes by just breaking what the listener is expecting. And then the next thing we can do is look at the first melody out of our 3 melodies that we have. So I'm going to play that melody by itself. And with the chords. So the first thing I note about the melody is that 1, it's playing quarter notes instead of, as the chords are doing, playing whole bars. So that's how we make the melody seem rhythmically distinct from the chords, is that it's playing a smaller subdivision of notes. The next thing is that we're playing quarter notes, and we're playing quarter notes on primarily downbeats, the 1 and the 3. The 1 here, the 3, the 3, the 1, and then the 3. And then we break the expectation that it's only going to be 1 and 3 the whole time, but add in a 4 every now and then just to switch up the rhythm just a little bit. And then, like last time that I mentioned, we want to keep the first bar and the third bar somewhat consistent. So how we achieve that is by playing just the 1 and just the 4 instead of playing the 1, 3, and 4 like the person would expect to hear. So that way it makes the rhythm seem very distinct. But it still grounds a listener because they still hear the 1 as they expected, and also still hear the 4 as they expected. And then for the 2 and the 4, for bar 2 and bar 4, we kept the rhythm basically the same by just playing the same G on the downbeat both times. And one thing I wanted to mention arrangement wise about how we achieve this kind of compound melody is that we played each melody in a certain amount of bars. So as you see here, melody 1 plays for the first 4 bars, melody 2 plays for the second 4 bars. So that way they don't step on each other's toes. And then we have the pad underneath that only plays for half or 2 bars out of the 4 bars that the first melody is playing. So if we play kind of just the first 3 melodies together, which is just the chords, melody 1, and the pad, it sounds like this. One interesting thing we can see about the pad is that unlike the other melody, this one is playing an extremely long note. It's playing a note that holds out for 2 whole bars, which makes it completely distinct from not only the chord progression, but the top line or the other melody itself. And then lastly, we have the third melody, which is like the other melody, just playing 1, 3, 4, but it's just playing a different melody altogether. So then for the last melody that we have, there's a couple things that make it seem distinct from the first melody. 1 is that we're playing obviously different notes. 2 is that on bar 2, we're playing the 2 of that bar, which we didn't do in the first melody. So it breaks the user's expectation of hearing the same rhythm again. And then in bar 3, what we do is we play the 3 of that bar, which we didn't do in the first melody. So as you can see, we're playing these 2 complementary melodies where one is playing notes and rhythms that the other one didn't. which makes them seem like two distinct melodies. So what we can see from all the examples is that the chord progression primarily plays the meter or the timekeeping element of the rhythm, and that's always generally going to be the case. While the melody plays the groove portion, it adds interest to what the chord progression is doing. But you don't want to just do that solely. You want to have your chord progression have a little bit of groove in it, and also in the same sense have your melody have a little bit of timekeeping in it. Mashing these two between elements will help your chord progressions and melodies sound more cohesive. They're both doing both things, not one thing is doing literally just one thing. That pretty much ends it for the video today, guys. As usual, if you like me and you like the video, gonna give this video a like and subscribe to the channel and hit that bell button so that we stay notified when I post new stuff. As usual, follow my Instagram at LahimaBeats. I post cool content all the time, the gear reviews and stuff I'm working on, and also follow me on TikTok, which I post cool videos also all the time and exclusive content you're not going to catch on my YouTube channel. And lastly, most importantly, I appreciate you guys watching the video, and I hope to see you guys next time. Lahima, out.